G'day, Doc. We've heard there's been a few disruptions from a protocols point of view. Is it a big disruption in terms of team selection this week, or is it just sort of the standard week in, week out reality that you're doing?
Yeah, unfortunately, it's becoming sort of almost mundane, isn't it? But we'll have three that will come out due to the health and safety protocols, which is frustrating for them, obviously, a bit frustrating for us as well. Probably, the only thing which is slightly annoying is the differential between our protocols and those interstate. So at least one of the players would be available if we were located in a different geographic situation. So anyway, that's what it is. As I say, we are actually sort of getting used to the fact that it's going to be part of this season, and the players, what's, I guess, the other bit which is frustrating for the players is that they're doing everything that they possibly can to avoid these circumstances, but clearly it's widespread and in some cases unavoidable, and obviously playing the games on the weekend is perhaps a contributing factor as well.
Absolutely. Pretty frustrating. Has it been something that, the squad mentality, has that been something that has been a plus and a positive though? Because we've seen, three pretty emphatic performances to start the year. There seems like there's a real unity there.
I always, it's a massive part of every season is trying to make sure that, there's a strong recognition that if we achieve anything, we'll do it all together. And if we're not so good and fail, then that'll also be done together. So that's no different from any other year. I guess just the practicalities of this season mean that philosophy is being tested weekly.
I'll work through both of the big question marks. Chelsea, do you expect her to play?
Yeah, I do. She's still probably got to get through the training tonight, but on the back of how she moved on Wednesday, I'm really confident that she will. But watch this space.
Great. And what was the go? The coverage didn't seem to really pick it up. What was the go with her foot, and how likely is she to play? Yeah,
so a bit similar in terms of when she came off, there was a decision to be made as to whether we put her back on. And so that certainly would have been possible for her to play out the game under some compromise, but we made the decision not to put her back out there, and that is to our benefit because it gives her a better chance to pull up well this week. So once again, I'm reasonably confident there, but she hasn't done, because of the injury. The medical advice was for her to have a pretty minimal week up until this point. So she'll train tonight, and then we'll make a call after that. But as she'll be selected, she'll be named in the team, and we're assuming that she'll get up.
Great. And is it sort of fair to say that, well, on paper at least, Melbourne's your biggest test so far to unbeaten teams going head to head?
Yeah, well, Brisbane in round one and North in round two are pretty challenging.
West
West Coast played a very strong game last week as well. So, clearly their form in the first three games is good. So's ours. So that makes for an exciting matchup. It's one of the great, privileges of playing good footy is that you get to play in big matches. So hopefully that's what this will be. And as we saw with the North game, when you play good teams, then it'll generally go right down to the wire. And we envisage that that's what it'll take, a 4-quarter performance.
Great, thanks, Doc. I'll let someone else go.
Cheers. Thanks.
Liz, please, Sanitizer.
Hi, Doc. I'll stick on COVID, if that's okay.
Yes.
So last week we had Hannah Manyard out under the protocols. Is she able to come back in this week, or?
Yeah,
not?
So she'll train tonight for the first time. So once again, that's somewhat frustrating in that in other jurisdictions she would have trained certainly on Wednesday. So that's a bit of a challenge for us, but we're working through that. We're working to try and create solutions which are as best as they can possibly be, given the rules. But yeah, her first session will be tonight.
So is it easy coming from, I suppose she's had 10 days out, to then come straight back, train and into a team, or is that going to be one of the challenges you're faced with this year?
Yeah, that's going to be a decision to be made based on, and unfortunately we're working off of how she's reporting, but also, it's a little bit limited, the data. So we'll obviously, have a good catch up with her tonight, see how she's moving, seeing how she's feeling, see how she's responded, and then make a decision. But as I say, it's just, I guess we're getting used to it. We're obviously very conscious of it. We're doing everything we can to mitigate the circumstance, but in the end, you've just got to sort of deal with what's put in front of you.
The depth of your squad's going to be really important, isn't it?
No, clearly, yeah. Across the competition, I think we're seeing that, and the good news is that we're really confident, right through to player 30 on the list. So, absolutely ready for those players to take the opportunity when they present. We saw it last week. We had 3 come in, and everyone played their role, did really well, and a lot of these players were really have been unfortunate to miss out in the early weeks of the season. So when they do get their chance, they're clearly chomping at the bit.
There's been a bit of talk about this pool of players. So we're seeing it in the BBL, that if you don't have enough players to pick from, then you pick from this pool of players. And there's talk that might come out in the AFL. Do you think that's something the AFLW should quickly implement so that we're not seeing games cancelled?
Yeah, well, it's an interesting approach. We've got, you've got a squad of 30. You've got then access to a list of 10 top-up players. I think the current position is 16 listed, and then access to 5 of the top-up. I reckon that pretty much covers it. If you haven't got 16 of your primary list available, then I think it's reasonable that those games are currently being rescheduled, because while you could dip into an extended pool of talent beyond that, you probably are then compromising what is your team, if you know what I mean. You're sort of, they'd be pulling on the jumper, but perhaps they wouldn't have that much connection to what it is that you're organising. And that might be okay in 1 or 2 instances, but I think you want to have, I think 16 of your primary list is a reasonable position to hold.
Fabulous. Thanks, Doc.
No worries. I always got to remember to look at the screen. I find it challenging to. Apologies.
I know, I'm working from home, so I'm not turning on my.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. No, I always realise halfway through the answer, I realise I'm not looking at the screen. Apologies.
Theo from 7, please.
Thanks, Danny. Hello, Doctor. Could I just clarify a couple of things? When you say protocols, obviously that means positive result, or is that just close contact?
No, it also means close contact, yeah. So that's the challenge, and that's probably, as I say, probably the frustration here is that the definition of close contact that we operate under is significantly different to that in other places. So that I guess if I was to have a minor frustration, it's that if you're unwell, if you've got COVID, then clearly we've got to look after your health and well-being and make sure that you're right. But when you're being ruled out and you're healthy, then that's really challenging. That's quite frustrating for the players in particular, and the coach, let's be honest.
Yeah, you're number one. So I suppose, is there a breakdown of, are you able to share like how many of the girls are just close contacts, or whether anyone else has actually tested positive? No,
as I said, I've said a couple of times, my only view on that one is, it's you can pretty much work them out by deduction, but I just sort of don't feel awesomely comfortable about speaking about other people's medical situation. Having been through it, it's not, clearly it's not that big a deal. A lot of people are, but there are just some extensions whereby, I don't know, people that you have been in contact with, your family, others, they just, you can add a layer of stress that isn't necessary. So that's kind of my personal place on it. And, clearly you're very intelligent journos and you work it out pretty quick, but that's your job, not mine.
No, understood. For the first time, really, we just sort of sensed a bit of frustration from your cool, calm self. How do you deal with losing a player who, again, like you said, isn't sick, could potentially or could probably play and has no real fitness issues? Does it start to grate on the coach?
Yeah, I probably overstated it a bit today. I mean, I get disappointed for the players. Really, that's from a coaching perspective, it's okay. Like basically, it's like in game. Injuries are part of the game, and players will become available and unavailable. And as a coach, you can pretty much quickly, snap into solve the problem mode. So that any frustration really, because as I said at the outlet, the opportunity that we're providing to players who've been really desperate to get that opportunity is the flip side. So coaching wise, it's okay. It's no big deal. It's probably just having, working with the players, talking with the players and understanding their frustration at being ruled out when they feel well. That's probably the piece. So it's not a coaching or personal frustration as such. It's just the reality of people having to deal with it and you therefore going through it with them a bit.
So what would you like to see happen?
Well, I think if we could just cure COVID and take the world back to how it was 2 years ago, that'd be nice. No, mate, it's what it is. Yeah, we're dealing with it. So I think everyone is, you might have got me on a bad day, maybe, but generally it's, we're just getting on with life, aren't we? Everyone. What do we want to do about it? We want to manage it as best we possibly can. That's what we're doing.
It's fair frustration. Lastly, from me, have you recommended any 80s movies to the girls now that they're in isolation? Any sort of,
Well, that was to educate our children, which we thought was very important. But no, I think they'll be right. We've had enough people now that have gone through it that there's a bucket load of advice coming through, and probably my best move will be to stay out of it.
No worries. Thanks, Doc. Good luck.
See you guys.
All right, Danny from the Victor Harbour Times.
Hey Doc, how you going?
G'day, Danny.
I was wondering sorry if this has already been asked, I was in a couple minutes late, but how does a defensive unit take on and shut down such a diverse and dynamic forward line like Melbourne's? Yeah,
well, that's going to be a really great challenge. One that I know that they're really looking forward to. So, clearly Melbourne have added Taylor Harris, they've got Daisy Pearce. Last year, Kate Hall kicked 3 goals against us as a small forward. Shelley Scott's really strong aerially, so they've got, as you've highlighted, they've got some great assets and weapons down there, and and our defenders, they're looking forward to those sort of challenges to play against the really good players. But the how is the same as every week, really. It's they're going to rely on some pressure from up the field, so that the Melbourne midfielders aren't having that time and space to be able to get the ball cleanly to those really good players' advantage. And if we can provide that, then we'll get it back to a 50-50 contest. And just luckily, we've got some pretty good players down there as well. So there'll be some great matchups. It's it's actually good to thank you for the question, because you reminded me that there's a footy game and we can get excited about it.
No worries. I asked Sarah this yesterday as well, but I'm interested in your thoughts. Obviously your forward line is quite strong and potent, and so is theirs. Do you see it being a high-scoring game?
Well, that'll be interesting to see. Often, when teams are well matched, then the scores can sometimes not be quite as high. There was a really high-scoring game a couple of weeks ago, Freo and I think Richmond. But generally, when you get good opposition against one another, then generally the games are tight, and so the pressure is high. And those, even though there is potent forward lines, there's also, as we highlighted, really strong back lines. So I don't know is the short answer. I'm sure from a fan's perspective, they'd love a shootout. I wouldn't mind a shootout as long as we win. But the probability is that it'll probably be more of a close, couple of goals type of game, I'd reckon.
Beauty. And sorry to bring it back to COVID, but training when you have the health and safety protocols, what does that look like? Is it tailored to each person, or do you have certain expectations that you want them to still hit even if they're at home?
Yeah, so we obviously manage it as best we can, and clearly depends on how they're physically travelling. We're really fortunate. We've got a really highly dedicated high-performance team and medical team, and so they're in really constant communication with the player. And as you said, based on how the individual is tracking, then their program will be tailored to make sure they can get in as much preparation as they possibly can. Obviously, there are constraints there, though.
Yeah. And how does the support for those players in isolation look like in terms of like mental health support and like just non-training kind of thing?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So Beck Mathers is our player development manager, and she's had a really busy time because, clearly this situation keeps rolling out every week. So she's kind of their first port of call, but then obviously the players, the coaches, the administrative staff, we all look to make sure we're including them as much as possible, staying in regular contact. And then in some ways there is a piece where at times you just think, well, I might just leave them alone a little bit here. It's a period of time where it's going to be challenging regardless. So sometimes you're better off to switch off from it a bit. So it's a bit of a balance there.
Yeah. Is dancing in costumes part of the package? I'm
unsure what that references, but I'm sure anyone that wants to dance in a costume, more than willing. I'm not saying anything against it, but I just don't know why this keeps coming up. It's starting to
got a bit out of hand. And back to the footy. Caitlyn Gould, is she able to come back this week after her head knock? Yes, she is. Yeah, so she's cleared all of the concussion protocols, and therefore she'll be available. Yep. Awesome. How did you sort of prepare Montana and Jazz to step up to that ruck role? Obviously, Caitlyn took over from Rhiannon, and that would be a bit of pressure, sort of being third and fourth ruck. How did that work? No, I mean, obviously, throughout the whole pre-season, all three have been in competition. That's the reality, to try and secure that position. And at various stages across the season, as we've just seen, I'm really confident with all three. What was great on the weekend was for Jazz to come back in and have her first game for our club since the pre-season of 2019. So that was exciting. And she played, not only did she play some ruck, but she played forward and back, and demonstrated that real versatility that we know she has. So now we're really comfortable. We've got great depth in that position. So at various stages, we'll have to call upon it. Sure. With the changes in rucks, do you change up the way that the midfield works around the style of the ruck, or do you get the ruck to change their style? There's a little bit of both. Yeah, the connection and cohesion between those groups is really important, and certain players are capable of doing different things. So your point around who moves is, I don't know, chicken and the egg. But yes, no, the mids will adapt to. Generally, the mids will adapt to the strength of the ruck, and that is always actually dependent on who's on the other side of the circle as well. So it's a little bit of a complex dance that's going on in there at times, but in the end, the ball will land somewhere and good players just go and get it, you find. That's it. Thank you. No worries.
All right. Brendan from Channel 10.
Hey, Doc, how are you? I don't have any COVID questions. I have something a bit different. Can I just get your reaction to the announcement yesterday in terms of the Brompton bid being not going ahead as for the Crows?
Yeah, obviously a lot of effort and time has gone into that proposal from a hell of a lot of people through our admin team, and so no doubt they'd be disappointed. But I guess at the same time as they've been doing all of that work, they've also been preparing some contingencies, because it was obviously a competitive bid process. So I'd imagine there's a level of disappointment there, but equally, probably some people are thinking they like the other options, so they'll be moving quickly onto those and making their plans based on yesterday's decision.
For you, what facilities do you guys need, or your team need as a whole at the moment, compared to what they could have had if you went to Brompton or Bowden? Sorry.
Yeah, well, we like an oval with 4 sticks at each end. That's important. To be honest, the facility will be, when it comes into existence, will be a massive bonus for the club. But we actually are really well served by what we've got, and we don't want for anything. We've got really good facility. We've got great staff, and I was fortunate enough to play for a few different footy clubs. The reality is that the facility is an important part of it, and you want to get that right. But in the end, footy clubs are about people. So we prioritise the staff that we've got. As long as there's footies and some weights to lift, we'll be right. So yes, it's an important piece to get it right, but equally there are, in my opinion, more significant pieces. So we'll put most of our focus there, and we'll take the cream on the cake when it arrives.
Do you think Thebby would be a good place to be?
I like Thebby. Yeah, look, I think it can work, absolutely. So we'll wait and see. They'll be working through multiple options from here, but that certainly has been one that they've put a lot of time and effort into as well. So it probably will be at the top of the list.
Thank you.